won't
the
have
time
a
for
house.
speaking has expired. I will move to question time, and I'm going to call Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Minister, in the Australian newspaper on Saturday, respected political commentator and author Paul Kelly wrote, Minister Gallagher denied misleading Parliament, but the facts told something different. While she had told Senate estimates no one had any knowledge of Higgins' pending revelations, she admitted in her statement that I was provided with information in the days before the allegations were first reported. It is obvious Gallagher misled the Parliament." End quote. Minister, how can Australians trust your government if you won't admit what everybody knows, that you did mislead the Parliament, and why won't you do the right thing and simply correct the record?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I refer Senator McDonald to the statement that I made at the beginning of last week on this matter relating to the allegation that I had misled the Senate, and specifically I will say that when it started at Senate estimates on June the 4th, when the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds, said that she knew where this started, and then she went on to say she was told by one of your senators 2 weeks before. I took that to mean 2 weeks before the story broke publicly about what you were intending to do with the story in my office 2 weeks before. That is 2 weeks before the story broke publicly. I was shocked by that, and I refer you back to the statement that I gave that goes through this, and then to my statement that I became aware of the details of the allegations being made in the days leading up to them becoming public, and that is the difference. And so I have been upfront and clear with the Senate. I did tell Senator Reynolds at the time in that private meeting, and I think perhaps all of this could have been avoided if that meeting wasn't private, but it was private. It was held outside of the Senate estimates room, but I did say to Senator Reynolds and Senator Ruston at the time that I had been aware of the allegations in the days leading up to them becoming public.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
Minister, in the Australian Financial Review newspaper last Friday, respected senior press gallery journalist Philip Curry wrote, Finance Minister Katy Gallagher was exposed by the text messages as misleading Parliament 2 years ago. Minister, how can Australians trust your government when you refuse to admit that you misled the Parliament? Why won't you just admit you made a mistake and simply correct the record?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I'll refer you to my previous answer, and I can't control what people write about this. There has been opinion piece after opinion piece after opinion piece written about the specific issues of the last 2 weeks, and there has been hundreds of opinion pieces written about the matters that led to a lot of change in this workplace. That is the brave and courageous representations by a young woman who used to work in this place and the change that's come from it. There has been so many opinions written. Those opinions vary. I can't control it. What I can control is the information that I provide here to the Senate. I take my responsibilities to the Senate very seriously. There was no mislead from my point of view. I did not know what was going to be made public when Senator Reynolds accused me of knowing that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Minister, on the ABC Insiders program on Sunday, June the 12th, award-winning journalist Samantha Maiden said, "I think it's open and shut that she's misled Parliament." Senior gallery journalist David Crowe from the Sydney Morning Herald, Simon Benson from The Australian and James Morrow from the Daily Telegraph have all said you misled Parliament. Minister, why do so many of the country's most experienced political observers agree that you misled the Parliament while you refuse to make that admission? Why won't you correct the record?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I refer you to my earlier answer, I cannot control what other people write about this. Maybe they don't understand it. None of them have spoken to me about it. I can't. Well, certainly they haven't spoken to me about it in the last few weeks. They're writing opinion pieces or saying opinion comment. I mean, that's up to them, and good luck to them. But I can say what I was responding to that night. What I was responding to that night was an allegation that I had known 2 weeks before the allegations that Ms Higgins made became public, was that I knew about them and I'd made a decision to be part of making them public. That is not correct. I never did that. That's outlined in my statement, and I was clear with Senator Reynolds and Senator Ruston 2 years ago that I did have, that I was aware in the days leading up to them becoming public. That
Thank
is
you,
2
Minister.
years
The time
old.
for answering has expired. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Constitutional recognition through a voice to Parliament started with Indigenous Australians. More than 1,200 First Nations representatives took part in nationwide consultations that led to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It will allow First Nations people to finally have a say on policies and laws that affect our communities. The Prime Minister declared his commitment to the Uluru Statement from the Heart at almost every speech and rally during the election campaign, and Australians voted for change. What progress has been made in implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart and a voice?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and it is an honour to take that question from Senator Stewart, and it is an honour and a privilege to serve in a caucus with our wonderful First Nations caucus members who are represented in the chamber today and ably spoken for by the wonderful Senator Malarndirri McCarthy on the third reading. And this is a big day. It's a day of great significance. It's a milestone which we will remember, and that is the passage of the Constitutional Alteration Bill. And it is worth remembering, as Senator Stewart has in her question, the history of how the Statement from the Heart came to be before this Parliament in its first iteration of the first request, which is a voice to the Parliament. Because in 2017, after more than 10 years of consultation and conversation, hundreds of elders and leaders gathered at Uluru, and together they wrote the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And it says, "We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country." So today we are one step closer to delivering that long Indigenous community-led process. Constitutional recognition through a voice is about two things: recognition and listening. And I want to quote what the Prime Minister said today. He talked about the request, and he said this: "What shines so brightly at the very core of its gracious request is the desire to bring us all closer together as a people reconciled. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to lift our great nation even higher."
Senator Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. The Uluru Dialogue centred around listening and respect for local communities. Building on that, the voice is about two things: recognition and listening. Can the Minister explain to the Senate how that will happen in practice?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. The Senator is right. Constitutional recognition through a voice is about recognition, and it is about listening. And recognition that will make us stronger and more united as a nation by finally recognising our First Peoples, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, in our Constitution. And it is also about listening, by making sure we are listening to our First Nations people on the issues that affect their lives through the voice. As Senator McCarthy said today, the voice has the support of the vast majority of Indigenous people. around 8 in 10 support a voice to the parliament. And the voice referendum is an opportunity to take our nation forward. The Voice's advisory power means that people in Canberra can listen and learn from our First Nations people before they make the decisions that impact them.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you. Last week, the Closing the Gap data shamefully showed that the gap is not closing. This highlights the need for structural change to improve outcomes for Indigenous Australians. How will listening to Indigenous communities through a voice to Parliament help close that gap?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Stewart, not just for these questions but for the work you've done in your community. And I think there's a pretty basic principle here that if you work with people, if you work with rather than do to, you usually get better outcomes. And as Senator Stewart said, we have 4 out of 19 closing the gap targets on track. Well, if we need any evidence that more of the same isn't good enough, I would have thought that would be it. Life expectancy not on track, Indigenous babies born with a healthy birth weight not on track, Indigenous people finishing Year 12 not on track, and we have to do things better, and that means working together. And the benefit of the wisdom and insights of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians across this country, our fellow Australians, this is about ensuring we can make lasting change together that can help us close this gap.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scarr.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Attorney-General, my fellow Queenslander, Senator Watt. Minister, does the Attorney-General agree that the Commonwealth should act as a model litigant in all legal matters it engages in?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister Watt.
Yes, of course the Attorney-General considers that the government should act as a model litigant in each matter that it's involved in, and as far as I'm aware, that's exactly how the Commonwealth acts, at least under the Albanese government. We do take those issues very seriously. It is important that the Commonwealth upholds that principle of being a model litigant, and I can assure you that, particularly in the hands of an eminent barrister like Mr Dreyfus, the Attorney-General, that is the principle that we uphold. I know that we haven't always had Attorneys-General in this country who have Mr Dreyfus's standing, both as a lawyer and as a person of principle, but we're very fortunate, I think, at the moment to have an Attorney-General who conducts himself in an appropriate way. I think it's excellent that we have an Attorney-General who, if asked to cooperate with the police, would do so, unlike previous occupants of this role. I think it's also wonderful that we have a man in Mr Dreyfus as the Attorney-General with the utmost integrity, who has not just promised to deliver a National Anti-Corruption Commission, but has actually done so, again, unlike former Attorneys-General that we have seen in this parliament. So yes, I suspect that we're leading to a particular matter, and I'll be happy to answer Senator Scarr's question about that. But of course this government takes its responsibilities to act as a model litigant seriously, whether we're talking about that in civil proceedings against the Commonwealth, whether we're talking about it in proceedings that the Commonwealth elects to join or intervene in. It is always important that the Commonwealth upholds its responsibilities to be a model litigant.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Scarr, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I might note that the Minister might do well to read judgments of the court before casting general slurs against previous occupants of the office. Minister, did the Commonwealth or its legal representatives always act as a model litigant during the mediation and settlement of the Ms Brittany Higgins claim against the Commonwealth?
Thank you, Minister Watt.
Well, I was wondering which case we were going to be talking about, and I actually thought that not only Senator Scarr but that coalition senators might have realised that after the way last week turned out for them, they might wish to move on to other topics. But unfortunately, we see the coalition intent on continuing its pursuit of Ms Higgins through the parliament. Unfortunately, we see the coalition intent to continue pursuing matters that have been the subject of leaked court documents to the media, matters that have been the subject of leaked text messages to the media. As I say, I really would have thought after last week and the way that turned out for the coalition that they may have learned the error of their ways. But obviously they are either so rigid in their questioning or so lacking in principle that they've decided to continue it. As we have said last week, Ms Higgins' claim was managed consistently with the Commonwealth's obligations under the Legal Services Direction 2017.
Has expired. Senator Scarr, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I note my questions are in relation to matter in the public domain. Minister, why didn't the Commonwealth or its legal representative seek the views or evidence of the ministers or their officers whose actions were cited in the claim against the Commonwealth? How does that failure align with the Commonwealth's model litigant obligations?
Thank you, Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. As I said in the answer to the previous question, Ms Higgins' claim was managed consistently with the Commonwealth's obligations under the Legal Services Directions 2017. The terms of settlement and the claim were managed in accordance with legal principle and practice and informed by external legal advice. And the parties agreed that the terms of the settlement and the settlement process, including mediation, are confidential. I would have thought that the lawyers in the opposition might have understood the meaning of keeping details of settlement processes confidential, but it would appear that is unfortunately not the case through these ongoing questions. Now, Senator Scarr comes back at me saying that these are matters in the public domain. I wonder how they got in the public domain. I wonder how it was that confidential court documents that were only held by a very small number of people ended up in the public domain. Who had those court documents, I wonder? Who had the opportunity to provide them to the media? I wonder who on earth that would be, and I wonder who on earth would think it is sound to keep asking these questions.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Housing in the Senate, Minister Farrell. Minister, 2/3 of renters are experiencing rental stress. For many renters, one more unlimited increase—
Order. Senator Faruqi, order on my right. Order on my right. Order. Order. I need to hear Senator Faruqi's questions. Please continue, Senator Faruqi.
For many renters, one more unlimited increase to their rent will mean that they have to leave their home, and some will be priced out of the private rental market altogether. If there are no limits to the amount that rents can be increased, it won't matter how much public and affordable housing is delivered through the Housing Australia Future Fund. Unless we stop rents skyrocketing, wait lists for public housing will blow out and we won't be able to tackle the housing crisis. On the weekend, the government put money on the table through the National Cabinet in return for changes in planning laws. Minister, does the government accept that they can also do this to coordinate a rent freeze, just as the Greens have proposed?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Order. Order on my right. Order. Senator Wong. Senator McKim. Senator Whish-Wilson. I should not have to single senators out. I have called for order. I'm going to call Minister Farrell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Faruqi for her question. But look, I have to say, Senator, on an historic day in this place where we pass a piece of legislation that allows for finally for a referendum on recognition of Indigenous Australians through a voice to Parliament, it's a great shame that the Greens have chosen this particular day to vote down a piece of legislation.
Order.
Vote down.
Minister Farrell. Order. Order. Senators on my right. And Senator Farrell, if you direct your answers to the chair, please. Please continue.
Thank you, President. So it's a great pity that on this historic day that the Greens would have chosen to link a decision.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat again. Order. Senator Shoebridge, there are many opportunities for you throughout the week to make a statement about the matters that you wish to. Question time is not one of them, particularly as I have called the right side of the chamber to order on a number of occasions. The minister is entitled to give his answer in silence. Minister Farrell, please continue.
Thank you, President. I know why the Greens are so embarrassed and keep interrupting. Keep interrupting me when I'm answering this question. This question. I know why Senator Shoebridge is so.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Please continue.
I know why the Greens are so embarrassed about what's happened today, because shame on you. You had an historic opportunity today to vote with the Labor Party to start.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Point of order, President. You just directed Senator Farrell, who's ignored your direction as chair, not to address the Greens directly.
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. I will draw that to Minister Farrell's attention. I have also spent a considerable part of the answer calling order across, particularly on the right and to the back of the chamber. I'd ask all senators to respect the directions I give. Minister, thank you.
I will direct my response to you, President, in light of that direction, because I know that you know that what I'm saying about what the Greens did today in alliance, in cooperation, what I earlier today described as an axis.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator, order. Order on my right. Government senators. Senator McKim, I think you also know better than to call out point of order as you're standing. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I do have a point of order, which is that Senator Farrell is reflecting on you as the President when he says that he knows that you know something, President. I ask you to require him to withdraw it.
Senator McKim, it was not a reflection on me. Please continue, Minister Farrell.
Look, I understand, President, why the Greens are so embarrassed and don't want me to answer.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Faruqi, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, does the government have modelling on the number of people and families who will become homeless because of rental increases over the next year?
Have you finished your question, Senator?
I have.
Faruqi, thank you. Before I call Minister Farrell, I'm going to remind government senators, Senator Wong, to listen respectfully to the minister's answer. Minister Farrell.
President, I unfortunately, because there was so much noise, I actually didn't hear the question. I wonder whether Senator Faruqi could repeat her first supplementary.
Senator Faruqi, please repeat your supplementary.
All the noise was from your side, by the way. Minister, does the government have modelling on the number of people and families who will become homeless because of rental increases over the next year?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, can I say this to Senator Faruqi? We don't need modelling to tell us that there's a serious problem with housing and homelessness and rentals in this country. We know after 9 years of failing to do anything about it, we are finally doing something about it. We're proposing to spend $10 billion on fixing this problem. Yes, I can repeat that figure, $10 billion. $10 billion. Some of that money will go to women and children in crisis situations. Some of that money will go to veterans. Some of that money will go to assisting Indigenous Australians. But the reality is all of that money is going to help solve the problem of homelessness, rental accommodation costs.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, is it the government's position that rental increases of any amount should be legal?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, the first observation I would make is that the federal government doesn't control rents. That is a matter for the state. But if this legislation was to have been supported, rather than being rejected by the Greens political party today, we would already be on the way to resolving some of the issues which you pretend that you're interested in solving. Now, we've got a solution here. You heard the Prime...
Sorry, Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My point of order is to relevance. My question was very tightly crafted and very straightforward about the government's position that rental increases of any amount should be legal.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. And Minister Farrell's been... Minister Wong. Minister Wong. Senator Farrell is being directly relevant to your question. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. And can I say to Senator Faruqi, just one aspect of the work that the Labor Party is doing to try and resolve this issue results in $600 million over the weekend announced by the Prime Minister to the people of New South Wales. We are serious about solving this problem.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Ciccone, were you on a point of order, Senator Hanson? No. Order on my right. Order. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you, President. And it's good to be back here after a week on the sidelines. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Senator Farrell. Senator, all senators in this place would be aware of the housing affordability challenges currently facing Australians. Thankfully, after a decade of inaction, the Albanese Labor government has an ambitious agenda to deliver more affordable homes. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the immediate steps that the Albanese government is taking to deliver on more social housing rental homes for Australians who need them?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone. Good to see you back. And unlike the Greens, I know that you are serious about dealing with the issue of housing costs and homelessness. And, of course, the Albanese government wants every Australian to have a roof over their head. Fundamental to tackling the country's housing challenges is increasing the supply of new housing. Just this week, we announced $2 billion in Social Housing Accelerator, which will deliver new social rental homes right across this country, including in Victoria, your home state. This money will be flowing to the states and territories within weeks and must be committed within 2 years to deliver thousands, I'll repeat thousands, of new social housing homes to rent right across the country. Funding has been to ensure a minimum of $50 million for each state and territory. States will have the flexibility in how to permanently boost social housing stocks, including new builds, expanding existing programs, or renovating or refurbishing existing but uninhabitable stock to bring it back to supply. This investment will mean life-changing new homes for Australians currently on social housing waiting lists right across the country. This $2 billion social housing accelerator is in addition to our ambitious housing reform agenda that builds on the commitment of the Albanese government to deliver the housing that Australians desperately need.
Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, President. And I thank the Minister for the very comprehensive answer. And it is reassuring to hear that the Labor Party is taking serious action on housing affordability in this country. And it is a pity that the same can't be said about those opposite and those on the crossbench. Minister, can you please update the Senate on some of the other important measures that make up the ambitious housing reform agenda of the Albanese government and how they are addressing housing challenges for all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thanks, President. And yes, I can, Senator Ciccone. The Albanese government has hit the ground running on housing, delivering immediate action along with ambitious reform agenda. As well as the $2 billion Social Housing Accelerator, and the $10 billion Housing Future Fund, which was rejected by the Greens today. In the budget, we increased the maximum rate of Commonwealth rent assistance by 15%. We added an additional $2 billion in financing for more social and affordable rental housing through the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation. We've created new incentives to boost the supply of built-to-rent accommodation, and we've expanded eligibility criteria for the Home Guarantee Scheme. And we've delivered a $67.5 million boost to homelessness funding to states and territories.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thank you again, President. Clearly, the Housing Australia Future Fund is an important component of the government's ambitious housing reform agenda. Can the minister please explain to the Senate, how the Senate failing to support the Housing Australia Future Fund will affect those Australians who are seeking a safe and affordable place to call home?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Yes, I can, Senator Ciccone. And let's be clear, the decision today by the Greens, along with their partners, the Coalition, rejected the bill to establish the Housing Australia Future Fund. Yeah, I'll just repeat that because I hear somebody didn't hear me say it. The Greens, in conjunction with the Coalition, rejected the bill to establish the Housing Australia Future Fund. And sadly, there is a cost. I know you're embarrassed. I know you're both embarrassed. Greens, Coalition. Sadly, there is a cost for these actions. It's a cost Australians will pay for the Greens teaming up with the Coalition. For every day of delay, more than $1.3 million does not go to new social and affordable housing for Australians. But the greater cost is to the Australians who need these homes. The women and children trying to escape family violence, veterans.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I refer to an article this morning on the front page of the Australian newspaper regarding a member of the referendum working group, Thomas Mayo. Does the Prime Minister endorse Mr Mayo's comment that the power of the voice to Parliament was its ability to punish elected members of this Parliament that ignored its advice on funding and legislation?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
Well, the Prime Minister and the government have made its views and its views clear about why the voice matters. As I think was discussed in great detail and at great length on Friday evening and Friday night and the early hours of Saturday morning. The voice is about two things. It's about recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our constitution, and it's about listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on matters that affect them. We've been clear about the principles associated with that. It does ensure that the voice will give independent advice to the Parliament and the government. The Minister representing has gone through the principles, which I can read out again, and I think were read out on many occasions in the committee stage and elsewhere in the debate. I would make the point, Senator Hanson, I understand what your position is. I thought it was very clear this morning. I disagree with it, but...
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson.
Bring back to the point of relevance to my question is the fact is, does the Prime Minister endorse Mr Mayo's comment that the power of the voice, its ability to punish elected members of this Parliament that ignored its advice? Direct question.
Thank you, Senator Hanson, and the Minister is being direct to your question.
What I was trying to say, Senator Hanson, and I understand the position you have, which is to oppose. I take a different view, as do the senators on this side. But the Prime Minister's position is the position that has been outlined by the government minister responding in the Senate over and over again. We've gone to great detail about how the voice will operate, the fact that it will not have a veto power and will not have a program delivery function. Others can choose to articulate this how they wish. The government will choose to articulate our view about how the voice will work. The independence of the advice, that it is chosen by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It will be representative, it will be empowering, community-led, inclusive, respectful and culturally informed. It will be accountable and transparent. It will work alongside existing structures and it will not have a veto
Thank
power.
you, Minister. Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
As usual, you have failed to answer the question. Do you endorse or not? No answer out of you. Will the Prime Minister rule out establishing seats in this parliament reserved exclusively for Indigenous Australians if the Voice makes a representation demanding it? Yes or no?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
In relation to the second, that's not something the government is proposing, and it's not something that the government took to the last election. We took very clearly to the last election a voice to the parliament. And we are seeking to deliver on that mandate. In relation to your first response, Senator Hanson, I appreciate you don't like my answer, but I am entitled to give I'm entitled, Senator Hanson, to give you the answer that I believe is correct in response to your question.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
So, in other words, you're not ruling out the fact that could be Indigenous seats only in this parliament. My question is, will the Prime Minister rule out the establishment of an independent, sovereign Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander state in Australia if the Voice makes a representation demanding it? You want the voice to Parliament. If they ask you the question, will you actually consider an independent Aboriginal Indigenous state?
Minister Wong.
That's not something the government is proposing, and I believe that question was asked and answered in the debate that we've had in the chamber overnight on Friday.
Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. The opposition supports Australians having cheaper and easier access to medicines. However, your government is claiming credit for a cost-of-living relief measure that is actually being paid for by 5,900 community pharmacies. Now it's been reported that modelling shows that up to 665 pharmacies may close as a result of your approach to force community pharmacy to pay for your 60-day dispensing policy. Minister, will you guarantee that no pharmacies will close as a result of your government's policy?
Good question. Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Ruston for the question, and it is an important one. The changes that we are introducing around dispensing fees, or about 60-day dispensing, because it will make medicine cheaper for more than 6 million Australians. I do note that the Pharmacy Guild has commissioned a report as part of their opposition to this change. I haven't had time to go through it all, but I am advised that the government does not agree with the assumptions underpinning the report and the conclusions drawn from it. Senator Ruston and I did have quite a lengthy session on this at Estimates, where we went through the impact analysis that had been done, and we did discuss issues around pharmacy and pharmacy viability. I think the work that the government has done through its impact analysis is clear. This will save.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much. On relevance, President, I specifically asked the Minister in relation to a commitment that no community pharmacy would be forced to close.
And there was also other points in your question, and the Minister is being relevant to the question. Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister.
Thank you. Well, the government is keen to work with the pharmacists, community pharmacists. We want a strong and viable community pharmacy sector right across, or industry right across Australia. We remain open to talking with all pharmacists about the implementation of this change, but I would say that this change has been recommended since 2018, I think, 2017, 2018, when it was from expert advice that this change should come in, that people could save money for a select group of medicines, for a select group of patients where their doctor approves it, that they would have to do less trips to the pharmacy.
Minister Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. Once again, on relevance, I was not asking about the support this was giving to Australians. In fact, I made the comment that the opposition supports cheaper and easier access to medicines. I was merely asking the minister to confirm or deny whether any pharmacies will close as a result of this policy.
You made reference to that report, and the minister has also made reference and is being directly relevant to your question. Minister, please continue.
Well, thank you. The government is investing $1.2 billion into pharmacies for ongoing programs to make sure that they can continue to do what they do and, in fact, grow the services they offer. And we want a strong and viable community pharmacy sector.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Ruston, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. As reported today, 20,000 pharmacy jobs may be lost and access to free medical services at local pharmacies may be ripped away from vulnerable Australians as a result of Labor's 60-day dispensing policy. Minister, will you guarantee that your government's implementation of this change will not result in job losses in the sector or have an impact on Australians' access to critical primary care through their local pharmacy?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister.
Thank you. Well, I can say that the government remains committed to working with community pharmacy and ensuring that they continue to provide the full suite of services to Australians. They are a vital part of Australia's health system, and we want them to do more, not less. But we cannot ignore the expert advice that comes to us that says that 6 million Australians could save hundreds of dollars a year if their doctor approves them having 60 days' supply of their medicines. There are a range of health groups that support this, and the government is keen to work with community pharmacy as we implement it. In fact, that's why it's having a staged implementation with medicines coming in and joining that list over the next 12 months. And we'll continue to work with all involved to make sure that the implementation of this is smooth and, where we can, provide those investments back in, particularly to rural and regional pharmacies.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Ruston, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, in budget estimates you confirmed that your government had not undertaken any modelling on the impact of your 60-day dispensing policy on the impact on community pharmacy in response to genuine concerns raised by small businesses across Australia. Now that this independent modelling has been released today, will you acknowledge that the Albanese government's lack of consideration and consultation on this measure will see pharmacies closed, jobs lost and access to critical primary health care ripped away from the most vulnerable Australians?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I would say the government did go through this with estimates, and there was an impact analysis done. Obviously, the Pharmacy Guild has commissioned a report as part of their campaign which is opposed to this, and which I said in answer to my first question, the government doesn't agree with the assumptions underpinning the report or the conclusions drawn from it. So I don't accept what that report says. I would say that the advice to the government and the advice that we took is about the fact that Australians on these medicines could save hundreds of dollars a year by making this safe and modest change to the way their medicines are.
Senator Ruston.
Once again on relevance, the minister continues to refer to access and cost of medicines, which I have not referred to at all. I was merely asking whether Australians would be worse off and whether pharmacies would close.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. The minister is being relevant. Senator Wong.
On the point of order, I would have thought whether or not an issue going to whether Australians are worse off might involve price. I know the opposition might find that difficult.
Senator Wong, I have responded to Senator Ruston's point of order, and I've said that the minister is being relevant. Minister. Order on my left.
6 million Australians will be better off if they take up the opportunity that comes, or if their doctor approves it, that they would be able to access 60 days as opposed to 30 days for a limited group of medicines. They will save hundreds of dollars a year. We think it's an important cost of living measure.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cox. Order. Order. I have a senator on her feet. Senator Cox.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Minister Farrell. Minister, in the 23-24 budget, there was a commitment for $12 million over 3 years for a review of the environmental management regime for offshore petroleum to ensure it's fit for purpose. This will include consultation of all offshore projects, including with traditional owners and First Nations people. This review quietly kicked off at the end of May. Minister, how is the government advertising this review to ensure that a wide range of voices are heard, including First Nations people?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the senator for her question. Well, of course, you know, all of the decisions which this government takes to the election, we carry through on. And you'll recall earlier today, we put up a vote to have a referendum on recognition of Indigenous Australians and a voice to Parliament.
Oh, sorry, Senator Cox.
This question is about the review of environmental management regime for offshore petroleum.
Thank you, Senator Cox. I'll remind the minister of your question. Minister Farrell.
Well, thank you, President. Well, my understanding, Senator, is that is directly related to a range of other issues, including issues that relate to issues that relate to native title. So I think there is some link between well, it's not. Well, with due respect,
Farrell,
Senator.
Please resume your seat. Order on my left. Order. Senator Birmingham. I've just called the chamber to order. Senator McKenzie. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. So, look, I think there is a connection, and unlike Senator Scarr, I don't think it's tenuous. I think it's directly related to these issues. Whatever commitments that we took to the last election are commitments that we are carrying through on, and that doesn't matter whether it's in relation to this issue or any other issue. We're a government that, if we say we're a government, we're a government that says if we're going to do something, we will do it. Thank you.
Senator Cox, first supplementary.
Okay. What is the timeline for this review, and are there any public terms of reference for it?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Cox. I will have a chat to the relevant Minister, Minister King, and I will come back to you with a formal response on that, Senator.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Cox, second supplementary.
Can you outline what the expected outcomes of this review, and how will it take into consideration important legal precedences such as the historic Barossa case determination in the Northern Territory?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Cox, for that question. Obviously, the issues that relate to the Barossa project and the decision of the courts in respect of that will be matters that will be taken into consideration. All of those issues that relate to court decisions in this space will, of course, be the subject of consideration by any inquiry. But I'll get a formal response for you from the minister in order to respond to that question.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Albanese government understands safe, secure and affordable housing is central to the security and dignity of all Australians, including economic security. Can the Minister outline to the Senate how the government's recent announcements in housing will provide greater economic security to Australians who are finding it difficult to find a safe, secure and affordable place to call home. How do these announcements align with the government's broader, ambitious housing agenda?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question and for her advocacy on matters relating to housing and housing affordability, particularly in Victoria, where I note the announcement on the weekend will mean that your good state will receive in the order of just under $500 million, so that there's extra investment going into affordable and social housing in the state of Victoria. Research by Equity Economics has estimated that $257 million in homelessness support services and $122.5 million in domestic violence support services could be saved with more funding and investment going into social housing. That's why building more homes has been central to our first two budgets and to our overall economic plan. This is one of the reasons why the Prime Minister and the Minister for Housing on the weekend announced the $2 billion Social Housing Accelerator program, which will provide new money in the next 2 weeks for new social housing, including here in my jurisdiction of $50 million for the ACT. This will create thousands of homes for Australians on social housing waiting lists and will increase housing supply sooner, with all the funding to be committed by the states and territories within 2 years. This continues the work of the new National Housing Accord, which is a shared ambition to build 1 million new homes over 5 years from 2024, and builds on the work of National Cabinet on renters' rights and planning reform. It will also build on the Albanese government's unlocking of $575 million in the National Housing Infrastructure Facility, which is currently being put to work to support new social and affordable rental housing. And also, on top of the investment in housing and homelessness, it will bring the total investment to $9.5 billion in this financial year alone.
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you for your answer, Minister. The Albanese government recognises the important role that the property and construction sectors play in our economy and in putting roofs over the heads of Australians. Can the minister outline to the Senate the views of the property and construction sector on its recent housing announcement?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the supplementary. The Albanese government has recorded the strongest jobs growth in the first year of any new government on record, with more than 465,000 jobs being created since we came to government. And we see new analysis released today that shows Australia is also a world leader when it comes to job creation and workforce participation. But we know if more people are to benefit from the strong labour market, we need to ensure there are affordable homes close to where those job opportunities are being created. And that's why building more homes has been central to our first two budgets and to our economic plan. It's why our Social Housing Accelerator program has been so warmly welcomed from across the housing sector. As Danita Warren from the Master Builders said, the accelerator is a crucial step towards addressing the persistent issue of housing affordability in the country. Or as Wendy Hayhurst from CHIA said, the government has grasped the urgency of the social housing shortage and crafted a policy that will accelerate planning, building and delivery of new homes.
Expired. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, in your first answer, you talked about how the Albanese government's Social Housing Accelerator is part of the government's broader, ambitious housing agenda. Can the minister update the Senate on that agenda, and what are the risks to its implementation?
Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Walsh. We do have an ambitious housing agenda, and we've added to it at every opportunity. A key part of that agenda is our Housing Australia Future Fund. The $10 billion fund is about creating a secure and ongoing pipeline of funding for social and affordable rental homes over the longer term. The fund has the support of our nation's peak housing bodies, as well as every state and territory housing minister. Indeed, it's hard to find anyone who could possibly argue against this fund, except here, right here in the Senate, where we have a majority of senators who are arguing against the fund. It would allow $500 million each year in new social and affordable rental homes.
Senator Scarr.
The answer is right there. We need to ensure that this housing fund gets established as soon as possible. The Greens political party and the Liberals and One Nation continue to block this important piece of national infrastructure.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Last Friday, the government made an announcement for $2 billion in payments to the states and territories. Is this payment reflected in the 23-24 budget that was delivered just last month?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you. This is in addition to the investments that we're making in the budget paper. And I would say, and we've said it time and time again, that focusing on cost of living pressures, working with the states and territories, delivering where we can in partnership to make a difference to the lives of Australians, we will do so.
Your seat. Order across the chamber. Senator McKim. Minister, please continue.
The Prime Minister has made it clear, the Treasurer has made it clear, that where we can make a meaningful difference to delivering on easing cost of living pressures and easing disadvantage across this country, we will do so. These matters remain ongoing in front of the Albanese government through our cabinet processes. We consider all of these issues in an ongoing sense, and this is no different. We see the need. We see great need. We've been working with the states and territories. We've got an obstructionist Senate that's refusing to allow the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is actually the fund that would allow this to be done, supported by legislation in this place. We've got states and territories advocating on their behalf about the pressures that they are under, and you've got a Commonwealth that wants to work with states and territories to deliver on outcomes for the Australian people. I know this is a novel approach, yes it is, considering the previous decade where the Commonwealth often didn't work in partnership with the states and territories, but this is a big priority for the states and territories. Now they have to deliver. They need to deliver on that. They have 2 years to deliver on that. $2 billion over the next 2 years to make sure they can invest in extra social and affordable housing to make the lives of people better in this country. We don't apologise for that. It remains on every meeting of every committee of this government how we can deal with some of these pressures and make a difference.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, what does the May budget assume the cash rate to be, and what is the current cash rate?
Minister Gallagher.
Well, I'm not sure how that relates to the first question. Well, I'm not entirely sure that they flow on from each other. One on the national or the social housing affordability accelerator, but the cash rate is 4.1, and I believe the budget was, and I'll correct this because I don't have it right in front of me, was 3.85. From memory, that is what it is, and those forecasts will be updated in the normal way, in the usual fashion, as they are and as they do for every budget and in the next economic update.
Minister Wong.
President, I ask that perhaps.
Minister Wong, please.
Thank you, President. I would request that you review the Hansard and come back to the chamber about the appropriateness of that as a supplementary. If the justification is it uses the word budget, that would have the effect of having anything in a budget supplementary to another part to a question, and that cannot be the gravamen of direct relevance. I'm just asking you, respectfully, to look at the Hansard and to give us a view about whether the use of the word budget in a primary is sufficient to enable a supplementary which goes to another part of the budget, another aspect of the budget, make it directly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. To make a submission on Senator Wong's point of order that you're going to consider, can I put 2 points to you? The first relates specifically to this question being asked of Senator Hume, and that is, I think you will find when you review it, both the primary question and the first supplementary question went to the accuracy of budget forecasts. The primary question did not make any comment or seek any response in relation to the policy propositions that the $2 billion was allocated for. It was about the accuracy of budget forecasts, as was the first supplementary. And so I think you will find that indeed they clearly are related. The second point I would make, though, is that in Senator Wong speaking about tangential relationships, if the word budget is there, is that sufficient for further supplementaries? I would note that in many answers given, ministers take one word out of a question, one particular title out of a question, and use that as their defence for direct relevance, even if it is not actually clearly directly responding to the question that has been asked. And so it is quite a stretch in relation to the argument being offered by Senator Wong in this regard. If indeed we want to have a tighter ruling in relation to questions, the opposition would certainly welcome a tighter ruling in relation to direct relevance of answers.
Thank you. Order. Order. Thank you, Senators Wong and Birmingham. Well, I will certainly review that tape and come back to the chamber. Senator Gallagher, you had 11 seconds. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. This government has put forward forecasts in the budget that haven't lasted a month, has spent money that it hasn't accounted for just a month ago. And although the Treasurer told Australians in October that inflation was public enemy number one and the dragon we needed to slay, prices have continued to rise unabated. Minister, how can Australians trust this government and what it says about the economy when its own budget is so out of date just 1 month after it was delivered?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Order.
Thank you. Well, as I said, the forecasts will be updated as they always are and as they were under your government. And I would say Australians can trust this budget because there's $5.7 billion going into strengthen Medicare. There's $1.5 billion going into the energy price relief plan, which you voted against. There's $4.7 billion going into working age and student payments to help give people an extra helping hand. There's $1.9 billion going to extend parenting payment single to make sure more single parents are able to support their children for longer. There's $2.7 billion going into Commonwealth rent assistance. There's a fund, a 15% pay rise for aged care workers that, of course, you'll be opposed to, no doubt. There's money going into making sure Australia is a renewable energy superpower. And there's money to support outcomes for Indigenous Australians. And yes, we have increased our offer on social housing because we believe in it.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice. Can I just indicate I have some additional information for Senator Hanson in relation to her question. I am advised as follows. We can rule reserved seats out. They are not our policy. The government's policy is the Uluru Statement, a constitutionally enshrined voice, and a Makarrata Commission for agreement making and truth-telling.
Thank you, Senator Wong.
Senator Scarr.
Thank you, Mr.